All right, let's get right into it. You've probably seen the headlines, right? Big, flashy news about a huge milestone for India's economy. And it sounds amazing, no doubt. But what's the real story hiding behind that giant number? That's what we're going to unpack.
And there it is, the headline that's been everywhere. India is now a $4 trillion economy. The IMF says it's even overtaken Japan to become the fourth largest in the entire world. I mean, on the surface, that sounds like a massive win, a huge sign of progress on the global stage.
But that's where we've got to pause and ask the real question, right? When you hear a number that massive, $4 trillion, what does that actually mean for the daily lives of the millions of people living in that economy? That's what we're going to break down right now. Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this, we've got to look at the two players in this story, India and Japan. Think of it like this. It's a tale of one economic pie, but two very, very different nations about to share it. And this is where things start to look a little different. See, both countries, India and Japan, have an economic pie that's roughly the same size, about $4 trillion. But here's the kicker. It's all about how many people you have to share that pie with. India, 1.4 times billion people. Japan, just 124 million. This leads us to a way more useful number to look at, per capita GDP. It sounds fancy, but it's super simple. You just take the whole economy, that big old GDP, and divide it by the number of people in the country. What you get is basically the average income per person. You know, how big is your slice of the pie? And wow, when you actually compare the numbers, the difference is just staggering. The average person in India makes about $2,500 a year. Meanwhile, in Japan, it's almost $34,000. Yeah, you heard that right. That's 14 times higher. So even though the pies are the same size, the average slice in Japan is a whopping 14 times bigger. Okay, so if India isn't number 4 when we look at it this way, where does it actually rank? Let's zoom out and see where it stands on the world stage. 163rd. Let that sink in for a second. While India's economy is the 4th largest in the world by sheer size, when it comes to the average prosperity of its people, it's ranked 163rd. That's a pretty massive detail that gets completely buried under those big headlines. And get this, for some context, to find a time when Japan's average income was where India's is today, you'd have to go back 50 years. 50! That really shows you just how big the gap is on this measure of well-being. Okay, let's try another angle. The only other country on Earth with a population anywhere close to India's is China, right? Well, China's per capita income is 5 times higher than India's. So you can't just say, oh, it's because of the huge population. Clearly, there's more to it. You'd think that's the whole story, but it gets even deeper. Because even talking about an average slice of the pie can be kind of misleading. The next big question is, who's actually getting the biggest pieces of this pie as it grows? And the answer to that is, well, it's pretty extreme. In India, the richest 1% of the population controls nearly 40% of the entire country's wealth. Just think about that. It means as the economy gets bigger, those extra gains are being funneled to a tiny group at the very top. So what does that feel like for everybody else? Well, for the vast majority, we're talking 90% of all Indians, they're earning less than 25,000 rupees a month. That's about $300 US. That is the reality on the ground, a world away from that shiny $4 trillion number. And this quote from our source material really puts a fine point on it, and it's a shocker. The state of inequality in India today is actually worse than it was under the British Raj, worse than during colonial rule. So after breaking all of this down, what's the big takeaway here? It's really about learning to see these huge economic headlines in a new light. It's about looking past the flashy number to find the metrics that really tell you what's going on. So let's quickly recap what we found. First, that huge headline GDP number, it really doesn't tell you the whole story. Second, per capita income. That's a much better way to gauge the average person's prosperity. Third, you've got to look at how that wealth is distributed to see who's truly winning. And the bottom line is, for most people in India, catching up on this front, it's going to take decades. So here's the thought I want to leave you with. The next time you see a news story cheering about a growing economy, remember to ask yourself this simple but incredibly important question. When an economy grows, who is it really growing for? Because that is the real story.